Hello and welcome to This Woman's Work, a space where you can hear and read about some amazing women, the fantastic jobs they do and the paths that have led them to where they are today.
Hi Michelle.
Hi Fran.
How are you?
Nervous.
That's
nervous.
Okay. Oh, that's okay. Yeah. And why are you nervous?
Because I am about to tell my own story.
Yes.
So, and I'm doing that. So this is the first video for This Woman's Work.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured that I should step up and lead by example. Not that I want to lead anything necessarily, but lead by example and be the first person on camera so that I can encourage all the lovely women who I chat to be okay on camera as well, because it is very scary.
Good for you.
Thank you.
So for your listeners who don't know my voice,
Yep.
I am Michelle's friend. My name is Frances Chatfield.
Very good friend, not just a friend.
And I am privileged and very honoured to have been asked to come and interview you today, Michelle. So thank you very much for that. And I'm really looking forward to spending this next hour together.
Yay!
So first of all,
Yep.
I think you should tell your listeners about your brand. So Michelle is the brains, she's the founder, she's the creator behind This Woman's Work. And why don't you just tell us a little bit more about the mission of this venture?
So the point of This Woman's Work, and there is some very, very bad audio that I recorded when I first launched, if anyone wants to go and listen to it. I launched it because I had been stuck in a bit of a career rut, a few times actually, but a big career rut recently, and I wasn't quite sure how to get out of it. And it suddenly occurred to me that I think there's a lot of women out there that can feel that, particularly after having kids, and particularly after perhaps playing more of a supportive role in a marriage and in a relationship. So I launched it so that it could hopefully be a sort of a career advice service for women that feel a little bit lost. There's a lot more to it than that, but there is some audio, because otherwise I'll just waffle on for ages about what it is. But yeah, hopefully it's a really supportive, celebratory brand about women and their careers, which can hopefully help and inspire other women that maybe feel a little bit lost. That's the theory anyway. Other than that, it's just me rambling on.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing that. And it sounds like an amazingly worthwhile thing and cause that you're doing. And from a personal perspective, a few years ago, I could have really done with that. So good for you for doing that. And it'll be really interesting to see how you grow on this journey as well.
Hopefully I'll be a lot less nervous on camera.
Yeah.
Shortly. That's also what this is about, is just to kind of, if I want to start interviewing people, I've got to build up my own confidence as well. So it's about kind of doing this. It's scary, but I'm doing it. And I think it's hopefully that will help inspire some women as well, just to kind of do scary things.
Absolutely, stepping out of our comfort zone. But also I think a lot of women are very scared to show up online, are very scared to be seen.
Yeah.
And this will be shared amongst a lot of your viewers, I'm sure. So
hopefully that's the plan. Or no one will look at it and it'll all be absolutely fine as well.
That's not going to be the case.
No.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Shall we get on with the interview?
Yes, let's do it.
And shall we start off with young Michelle?
Yes, okay. This is the bit that I normally do. Let's track back. Okay, so, by the way, I'm really sorry. I'm just going to have to keep flicking that because it goes off. Okay, so young Michelle, or young Chops, or young Shelley, whatever different people call me, was probably very average, did okay at school, wasn't hugely academic, loved sport. Yeah, just very average, I'd guess. However, I was I was a very unhappy child. That's the only way I can probably describe that. My dad left when I was 8, and which in itself was a bit of a blow, but it was more the impact it had on the sort of family dynamic that he left behind that was probably a little bit more tricky. So, it basically sent my mum down quite a sort of dark spiral, really. And I think she'd maybe already been a little bit prone to depression and maybe other things, but, my dad ran off with another woman, and it was really a horrid, messy, horrid, toxic situation. And, my mum understandably took it really badly, and just seemingly remained quite unhappy for many, 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 many years afterwards. And that was quite tough, I think, for my sister and I to live with. And I think, without wanting to cast really any aspersions on my mum, because she's been a good mum and she's taught me a lot, I think I very much grew up feeling unliked, not necessarily unloved, but unliked. And that was quite a hard thing, I think, because I think there was a number of things. I think when I first came out, I wasn't a boy. She'd already got a girl and I wasn't a boy. And I think she maybe felt pressure from my dad, as probably lots of women did, still do, I don't know. I wasn't a boy. I was another girl, and then didn't sleep very well, which I think a lot of people can really relate to. So I think I was probably quite tricky. Although equally, nowadays I think we're all wise enough to understand often if babies aren't sleeping, it's actually probably more to do with the dynamics of what's going on. And I don't know if my parents' marriage was particularly happy anyway. I'd assume it wasn't, because he went off with another woman, which isn't funny at all. But anyway, we'll laugh about it. So I think I didn't sleep very well, so that probably was really tough. And then I don't really remember a massive amount until my dad left when I was 8. And then from that point on, my mum just was really, really sad. It's probably the best way I can describe it. Very sad and probably a bit bitter for quite a long time. And I think as I then got a little bit older, I think I reminded her a lot of my dad, and she would say that to me a lot. And obviously I was acutely aware that she hated my dad. We just argued a little bit, whereas my sister was a lot more passive. She was the older, which was a lot more passive. She was a lot more quiet. Was probably a little bit more challenging for my mum, and probably pushed her buttons a bit more. And I think as a result of that, I very much reminded her of my dad. And I would regularly, it's just one of the things that she would say things to me like, I wish I'd thrown you out of a window when you were a baby. And I don't know why I'm laughing at that, because that isn't funny, but she would say that to me a lot. So I kind of grew up with that narrative that she just didn't like me and wished I grew up thinking or feeling that she wished I wasn't there, or I don't know, always wished I was fundamentally different to how I was. So that definitely shaped me, I think, in terms of my own view of myself. And also, it was just 3 women. My dad wasn't around. We didn't see him for many years. We saw him for a little bit when he first left. And then kind of things got a bit weird, and then we basically stopped seeing him, which in hindsight we shouldn't have done. And my mum probably could have done more to have prevented that from happening, but I guess equally she was going through her own pain as well. I didn't see my dad then until I was 17, and basically I rocked up at his doorstep after a big argument with my mum. I rocked up at his doorstep at 17 and he had no idea who I was. By this point he was a chronic alcoholic and a drunk, so that played a big part in it. But yeah, I remember just answering the door and he had no idea who I was, and I was like, it's me, kind of thing. But yeah, so Gosh. It was just the 3 of us. So it was just my mum, who was very unhappy, my sister and I, who were both, I think, were all quite unhappy. And I've said to my sister very recently that we were very much just islands. We were not a lovely tight unit. We literally were just three women existing on our own in a house, managing our own emotions, managing our own trauma, really. And obviously my sister and I were growing up. So yeah, that was really tricky. And I think equally at the same time, my dad pretty much left and took kind of, not that there was much, but you know what I mean, like the family money with him. So my mum then had to go back to work, and I grew up with like money being a real issue, or the lack of money being a real issue. And, you know, it was just a constant thing that was talked about. My mum would talk to other people about it. So I think it's sort of growing up, you know, realising or having this view that money was so utterly important, I think was quite key. And I think also, weirdly, body image. I grew up, my mum always, I think from a really young age, had quite a significant weight problem. She really battled with the weight, as lots of women do. And I mean, she still does even now. She's about to turn 80, and she will still talk about wanting to diet now and got to lose some weight. And you just sort of there going, God, Mum, just be happy. You know, just be happy. But so very much weight was a big thing. And then I think that also became an extra barrier between my mum and I, because I was sort of, you know, taller than she'd ever been. I was slimmer than she'd ever been. And, you know, maybe prettier than she was, you know, because obviously we're all in evolution, and I'm not saying that at all in an arrogant way. And I think on top of everything else, it just was extra, it just felt like extra things she didn't like about me, or she sort of resented about me. And so, and she was just a very unhappy woman for a long time. Definitely, I totally see that she had her own stuff. But for me particularly, that was quite tough growing up. And I think I guess I'm talking about it because it really, now that I, you know, having in the final stages of divorce and going through what I've gone through in the last couple of years, I've definitely done a lot of self-reflecting. I mean, gosh, I've spoken to you a lot, haven't I? We've spoken loads. About how things fundamentally shape you and your view of the world. And I think for me, going back to who I was as a child, I think I was probably a lot more creative than I realised. Not arty creative, but like I loved writing, and I loved, you know, I'd write loads, and I was quite creative. And I think in a different life, I probably would have pursued a more creative route quite early on. But I think because of how I was being brought up, and definitely because, and I've spoken to women that have said a similar thing, because money was such a big issue. You know, it seemed to me like, one of the things I will say to close friends, you, and I will say to my sister, is it's quite tricky. My sister has almost sort of replicated my mum's life in some respects. Whereas I looked at my mum, and my mum has taught me a lot, but the biggest thing my mum taught me was how to not be her. Not through anything she said, but she presented to me this just fundamentally unhappy woman. She was really unhappy. And I was like, right, okay, how do I not become that? And one seemed to be money. I've got to quite clearly earn a lot of money, because it's obviously stopping her from doing things she wants to do. It's stopping us as a family. Weight, quite clearly, I need to, you know, never be overweight. I need to always kind of be slim, so that, you know, potentially my husband doesn't leave me. Slightly, not that he has necessarily left me, but yeah, slightly still gone wrong in that aspect. But, you know, I grew up thinking, okay, well, I've got to be the opposite of you. If I've got any chance of being happy and not being you and ending up where you are, I've got to do everything I can to not be you. And that was literally the overriding thing I just fundamentally felt growing up. And so whereas sort of school, college and uni, in another world, I probably would have maybe gone on to do more creative subjects and creative A-levels and that kind of stuff, it very much sent me down quite a business route, because I was really adamant that I needed to earn really good money. I've got to be really independent. I've got to earn good money so I can do the things that, you know, that my mum clearly wants to do and can't do. So yeah, that's a tricky thing when you look back on that, because, you know, you listen to some people that have had very supportive, caring, loving upbringings, no disrespect meant to my mum, And in some respects, they've just, they've been free to kind of almost choose what they want to do and go on to do what they want to do. And, and then I was, you don't get me wrong, my mum didn't force me down any route at all. She really didn't. But I think just by default, it was learning, making decisions that actually probably weren't quite right for me. But they're the decisions they're the best decisions I could make at the time for what I knew at the time, really. So that kind of definitely sent me down the business, marketing route. I did business. I did do English, actually, A-level, and did really well at that, and won a poetry competition. That was really, and it was national. I did win a national poetry, or maybe it wasn't actually, sorry, maybe it was regional. I did win it, so yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, so my writing was still quite key. But yeah, by this point, I did a business A-level.
Okay.
And I was like, right, that's it, because clearly this is where I'm going to go and earn the money. So that's where I went, and then went off to uni, did business and marketing at uni. So that was obviously still on that. That was my path, and that was where I was going to go. Left uni, came out of there straight away. I got the first job I ever applied for, an advertising agency, which was great because that's what I wanted to do, and that's obviously where I thought the money was going to be. Little did I know I then got paid about 10 grand. I got paid, this was a long time ago because I'm old, but 10 grand for working like an absolute dog. It was quite hardcore, but learnt a lot, definitely about kind of attention to detail and focus, and, I definitely learnt a lot in that job. And it's always one of those things, isn't it? I think you come out when you're 18, and kids are now, they're so cocky, aren't they? And I was so cocky, I was like, that was it, I'm going to go and conquer the world, I'm going to be earning a fortune. And I basically earned 10 grand for working really, really hard. And it was a really good, it's humbling, and I think that's really important.
Okay, great. So we've got you in your first job, you're earning 10k. We've got a fairly cocky early 20s grad who has set her sights on an advertising career. Yeah. So talk us through what happened after that.
It was quite hardcore. I decided to leave, and I basically got a job in financial services, which I quickly realised wasn't for me. Lovely people, lovely team, but when you kind of think this isn't very massively creative.
I've known you for 9 years. I had no clue that you used to be in financial services.
So so sort of like a banking brand. Did that for a bit, but really wasn't for me. And then I basically left that on a whim because I'd seen this job advertised for a magazine publishing company, but it was kind of like, it was contract long term. Mm-hmm. So, I think I'd only been in this building society for about 6 months, so I was already a little bit. Then I saw this job advertised and I thought, well, I'll apply, see what happens. Got the job, but it wasn't guaranteed, and I really didn't know what I was going to do. But I don't know whether, I don't know, whether it was my intuition or what, I did decide to just stick with it. I did decide to leave and went to the magazine publishing company, and that was the best decision I ever made. It was just, when people will have certain things in their life, that is absolutely one of the most pinnacle parts of my life. When I was 22, 23 at this point, and the reason why it was pinnacle was because I was working in a really creative environment. So for me, and like I was saying earlier, probably the creative side of me suddenly had this box ticked, but also I was doing my degree and everything I'd done. So the thing that I'd done that I probably wouldn't have done in another life, I was doing, and I was still able to do it. So it wasn't wasting what I'd done, but I was doing it in this massively creative environment with designers and writers, and it was really cool brands, and I loved it. And I had a great career there for about 5 or 6 years, until it literally got to the point that they were looking for some voluntary redundancy. So I decided to take that and just sort of try something new, which I did. And I didn't know what new was. So I basically went freelance at this point. Again, probably a little bit really weirdly confident, because I think a lot of people wouldn't do that. Do you know what I mean? They can't leave one job without going to another job. But I think maybe because I'd done it I'd left the ad agency, gone to the building society, that hadn't worked, and I'd then gone and done this contract, which then led on to a job. I thought, okay, well, maybe, you know, I'll make it work and we'll figure it out. So I decided to go freelance just to kind of see what was out there and do contracting work, which I did. And one of the first contracts I ever got was for a clothing retail company that my sister worked at. That was very much mail order catalogue at the time, and very direct mail based. It was very, I remember walking into this as this sort of, because my background sort of brand marketing, that kind of thing. I walked in, you know, as this sort of brand person, fluffy brand person, as I call it. And everybody else was very much direct marketing and serious and numbers and data. And I was only freelancing at the time, so it was fine. But whatever it was, they really, I guess, liked what I brought to the table, saw that it was different, saw that it needed to happen. And I pretty much got offered a job quite quickly, which I ended up deciding to take. And I did that. I took it, did a lot, built a little small team, created the whole new brand function there, which was great. And then after, I think I'd maybe been there about 18 months when I left, and I'd got a friend. I was out, it was the summer holidays or summer. My friend who lived in Sydney was over visiting. And so I was sort of, I guess it was, you know, when like the things align, and I sort of sat there and she was there, and, you know, I was unsure what I was doing with my life, blah, blah, blah. And she said, oh, why don't you just come to Australia. So I was like, bugger it. Yeah, that is what I'm going to do. And it's funny actually, because I had wanted, there's loads of times I'd nearly travelled when I was younger, and I'd wanted to travel a few times, and just things just hadn't quite worked out for me to do it. I was like, bugger it, I'm going to do this, I'm going to travel. So I booked my ticket there and then, told where I was working that I was going, and pretty much gave them like 3 months notice. So I'm going in 3 months, you know, this is dream goal, that kind of thing. Recruited my replacement, did all that kind of stuff, saved up some money for 3 months. And yeah, and then basically hopped on a plane to Sydney, not really thinking I would ever come back actually. It was very much I'm going to go and start a whole new life. The thing that slightly put a spanner in that works is as I'd made that decision to go travelling, I started seeing a guy sort of more as a bit of just a bit of fun, you know, it was just going to be a bit of a fling before I went away. I knew him, we'd been friends for years, and we just sort of, you know, I literally did proposition him and said, look, I'm going to Australia, but, you know, we'd been friends for years, do you want to go and do you just want to have some fun for a few months? And he said, yeah.
A stopgap.
Yeah, and he said, yeah. So we did that, but then things sort of developed a little bit with that relationship, and I guess we'd been friends for a long time as well. So when I did go to Australia, and some other things happened as well, but I then was like, oh, okay, I wasn't sure, do you know what I mean? It's like, should I be giving this relationship a bit more of a go? Should I not? Anyway, flew out there, and after about a month, 6 weeks, decided that I probably should give that relationship a bit of a go. So I decided to only just do travelling for 6 months or maybe 8 months, whatever it was, and travelled all around Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, you know, some of China, Hong Kong, all that kind of thing. And then came back, pretty much instantly moved in with him because I'd rented my house out and I had nowhere to live. And it's kind of like, well, either I go and live somewhere or should I just come and live with you? And he was like, yeah, just come and live with me. So I did. Well, I mean, I obviously went on to marry the guy, you know, it sort of worked out, even though I obviously went out very sadly getting divorced, but it did sort of work out. But when I came back, started freelancing again, what was interesting about that is that the point we first got together, he had also just gone freelance. So he was a writer and he'd just gone freelance. So and I sort of helped him set up his sort of business before I left. I then sort of left, came back, and when I came back, he's, you know, very creative guy, but he literally was in a right pickle. You know, he wasn't invoicing anyone properly, didn't know how to do any of his finances, was struggling to manage his own calendar. So pretty much when I came back, you know, I moved in with him, started freelancing again, and instantly basically started sort of supporting him with his sort of career and his business, because he'd started to do some TV work at this point. So, you know, his career was really sort of taking off. And ultimately he needed help. So it was very much a case of, well, look, either I do this or you've got to pay someone else to do it or whatever. So I very much took that role on for him. And I always, and even for all of our marriage, I very much did everything that wasn't front of house, let's say. You know, he was great at sort of presenting and great at being kind of, you know, the front man. But he needed a lot of help behind the scenes, to put it mildly. So I did that. So I did, you know, I did all of his legal stuff, all of his accounting, his diary management. I was an agent. I did all of his contract negotiation. Basically anything that wasn't front of house, I did. And he was, you know, the kind of the money shot. He was the person. And that was very much how the marriage and the relationship worked. I mean, obviously it was up and down. His career was very up and down. His earnings were very much up and down. And throughout the same time, I had worked full-time, came back, ended up back with the clothing retailer full-time. We got married, had kids, tried part-time. I think the amount of women that I've chatted to that, you know, just say it's really difficult when you've got kids to then decide whether you go back full-time, part-time. And then you do part-time, you feel like you're not doing a particularly great job either, you know, because you're trying to, you know, you're struggling. Because really what most women do is try and fit in 5 days into, say, 3 or 4. So it's just really, really hard. And then you're going back and then you feel you're not then being a great mum at the same time. So yeah, so that kind of was very much what I did for a number of years, really. I guess until things changed somewhat at the start of 2020.
Right, so we're in 2020. Do you want to tell us about 2020? A big year for everybody, let's face it.
Oh my God, weird.
The world
weird
changed.
Year. The world did change. So before the world changed, and probably just sort of towards the end of 2019, so I wasn't working anywhere else at this point. My ex-husband was working, or he had been doing a lot of work for a YouTube channel, quite a big YouTube automotive YouTube channel, and things went quite sour. Things turned really sour, it went quite sour quite quickly actually. So we made the decision for him to leave working for that other YouTube channel, and that had been his first kind of flurry really into. Or our first flurry into YouTube, because this YouTube channel was really big and really successful. And it was, I guess, the start of kind of, I guess, you know, we'd got like Netflix, Amazon, all these other things coming in. So TV really, which he'd done more traditional TV prior to that point. It really, you know, the YouTube world was really opening up at this point. But anyway, so we made the decision for him to leave. However, he had... Just before we made that decision, he'd been away and he'd filmed a review, this is very random or very specific, of the new Honda E. So he'd been away and filmed this car review with a freelance videographer. And now at the time, because they were both freelance, so the invitation had gone to him, but it was really meant for this other channel that he was working for. And of course, because he then left under a bit of a cloud, and quite abruptly, it was then kind of a case of, right, well, what do we do? What do I do with this? I've got this video. Do we still let them have it? Do we, you know, give it to someone else? And so when I say we, it was literally me and him going, well, what do we do? You know, so he spoke to Honda. They were quite happy and they trusted him to kind of do something with it. The freelance videographer had... you know, obviously he just needed to be paid. So as long as he got paid, he was quite happy and he trusted us as well. So we spoke to a few different people. This was now the start of 2020 about what do we do with this video. And that's really how it all came about. It was just one single video. So what do we do with this car review? And we tried to pitch it out to a few different people, and they weren't really. And also because he'd left this other YouTube channel, we were kind of going, well, maybe, do you want to do something with him? Do you want, he could maybe go and start presenting for another channel, that kind of thing. We were just sort of teeing a few things up. Nothing came off. And for people in this kind of world, I don't know if many of them are going to ever listen to this, but all car launches have embargo dates. Well, lots of things have embargo dates, which basically means you film something or you shoot something and then you can't release it until this embargo date. So this embargo date was in, I think it must have been like the end of Jan or something like that. And that date was looming. So the clock was ticking for what we were going to do with this video. And we just, no matter what we tried, we couldn't figure anything out. So it just got to the 11th hour and my ex just said, well, that's it. I'm just putting out on my own channel. And by this point, he'd got his own little hobby channel, which had some lawnmower videos on it, some videos of him driving some RC cars. I think he had done one sort of car barn findy video, which had done really well. But do you know what I mean? It was very much just a hobby. There was nothing going on it channel. But he did have, I'm sure he did still have about 9,000 subscribers, I think, from memory. Anyway, what he did, and it was quite well known. He said, right, that's it, I'm just going to put it out on this channel. Because I think by this point now, we were 2 days out. It was really down to the wire. And I said, look, you can't do that. That's not fair to Honda, because this car was really hotly anticipated. It wasn't just a car review. This was the electric car that everyone had been waiting for. So it was a really big, this is the thing, it was a really big car video to just have, and not, do you know what I mean? It could have been any other car, but it was this particular car that was really important. I said, look, you can't do that. And I then said, look, in which case, if that's our only option, we need to do this. You've got to just, we've got to actually go for it. They've made a YouTube channel work. Let's do the same, and I think I knew because, he was great at what he did. He was great front of house and presenting. I was really good at the business side of things. So I said, look, let's just do it. He also didn't have a job at this point as well, because he'd stopped working for this other channel. So we've got to start earning some money from somewhere.
And had we gone into the pandemic at this stage?
No,
about to?
No, we hadn't gone in. And so, yeah, basically, we then decided, okay, we're going to give this a go. I wrote him a script. I sent him off with my car and I said, look, there you go and film yourself saying this. And I think what was interesting at the time is that it was the start of a lot of kind of, we're obviously living in this age now of real inclusivity and diversity and kind of, gender, sexuality, various different things. And it just, because obviously my background was quite sort of strategic brand marketing at this point, it was quite obvious to me that, and I'll say this to people, I think it was things happen at the right time. It's the right thing to happen at the right time. And I think he was the right person with the right story for the right time. So when I wrote the script, I very much wrote it about, him not fitting into a box, because it's true, he's quite eccentric, not fitting into any box, and therefore deciding that he wanted to go it alone and be brave, and kind of make his own content and follow his own path. And I think, I coined the term, which I think he probably thinks he coined, automotive pansexual. Which he did say. I didn't know if he was going to say that, but he did say it on camera. Automotive pansexual. Because I think that's a thing. The pitch, it was we're of that time whereby being different was starting to really get celebrated, and he was different. So I that's very much how I wrote that pitch. And of course he recorded the video, did a great job, came back, and this was all so quick then, and we pretty much got that video out because I think the embargo date was the next day. We put that video out, this announcement video, then released the Honda video the same day. and it just went mad. It went really mad. I think it was the right pitch at the right time, followed by the right car, if that makes sense. You know, our things just sort of align, and it just got a great response, did really, really well. And then I think he quite quickly got another car in, and we kind of, you know, started making a rough plan. I mean, it was so, literally, we were fully hand to mouth at this point, winging it as we went, of how we were going to work this. And I think we'd only been doing that for about a month before COVID.
Wow. Then
sort of came along, and and really just changed everything. And it's one of those things that it was tricky from a car perspective, logistically, trying to how we were going to start, how we were going to film, even working with videographers, how we were going to film stuff. I mean, luckily my ex owns a lot of cars, which has been a bone of contention over the years. So he had his own cars to film, and you could start filming kind of manufacturer cars at some point. But I think really the most poignant thing about that time was that people went into lockdown and consumed YouTube content like never before. So again, it's this perfect storm of the right story presented in the right way by the right person, because, you know, by him, at the right time, because suddenly all people were doing was pretty much consuming YouTube content. So it just, as tricky as it was getting those car videos out, we just had this hungry audience for it. So, and I think had it not been lockdown and not been COVID, I do believe it would have taken us a lot longer, do you know what I mean, to grow the channel, because people, you know, their media consumption was very different. So it was just the perfect storm of things that aligned to make that work. And it grew really rapidly to the point that I'm pretty sure we got to like 100,000 subscribers on YouTube within like 6 months. It went that rapid. But what we were getting a lot of was feedback, I should say, because the channel name was called my ex-husband's moniker. Is that the word? Moniker? You know, like he had a name, but he still has the name that he calls himself and refers to himself as, and it's quite a divisive name for anyone that knows. And we were getting a lot of feedback from people that basically said, love what you're doing, think this is great, but I just really struggle with your name. You know, it's really making me feel uncomfortable. It's making me doubt you a little bit. It's just not right. We particularly got a lot of that from the States, where it really was struggling to resonate. And also I was going out trying to get sponsorship and trying to earn some revenue. And I just couldn't get any brands to align with us. We'd got little pockets of things, particularly during lockdown, as people were a little bit desperate for kind of brand content. But nothing would land. And by this point, I mean, you know, we made the decision from really early on to do the videos to a high standard because of what my ex had done. He'd been, you know, doing TV work. You know, we knew that it couldn't just be some really low rent. Well, it could have been, but, you know, we made the decision to make really pretty high quality videos so that they would, you know, stand the test of time. But that cost a lot of money. That was costing us a lot of money to do that. And we weren't earning really any money at this point through the YouTube channel, struggling to get any money from brands to sponsor us. So we were just going through our savings, which was slightly stressful. So basically, after months of just trying really, really hard to convince him, I finally managed to convince him to change the channel name. Because it was his moniker and it still is his moniker, and he was really proud of it. But I just knew that we needed to change it, and he didn't want to change it. But then finally, when I came up with the new name, and I remember I WhatsApped it to him one night. I think he must have been away on a job, and I WhatsApped it to him, and he loved it, and he went, "That's brilliant." And then that was the point that, you know, okay, I've got the green light to change this. And then went into just a fab process of obviously creating new branding, you know, social accounts, website, everything else. And I think we'd been going for about, this was now September, I think, maybe. we decided to just sort of launch and announce the new name. And again, wrote him a script, sent him off, this time with his car, and he announced the rebrand. And things really kind of took off at that point because people love the name. It just got rid of any of that kind of negative connotation. You know, when in the script, I'd still sort of written that, you know, he is still his moniker, you know, he's never going to change, that is who he is. So he was still very much owning his identity and what he believed in. But, you know, we wanted the channel to be able to be bigger than that, to be more than that. So we'd come up with this great name, I think, because it was a really good name. People just really liked it, and it was a good play of words. And and so that was September, announced that. Things really went on. I mean, just had loads of fun with that. Created.
I'm sure everyone's dying to know what the name is.
Well, the name is The Late Brake Show, as in car brake, so BRAKE, which, if you're not really into cars, it probably won't really mean anything. But I came about the name because I was watching, because again, we were still sort of slightly lockdowny, weren't we, in that September, it's still 2020. And James Corden, who started presenting The Late Late Show in America, and he was doing carpool karaoke, which was really blowing up on Instagram and on YouTube, on social, and I used to watch a lot of that. And it just sort of came to me. God, I mean, I was trying to come up with all sorts of names because I knew if I didn't come up with a name, I'd never convince him to change the channel. So the name just sort of came, and it really worked. And you know, we had lots of fun creating the logos and everything. And also, I think my background, one of the things I was really keen to do, which he still does, it still happens to this day, because of the whole point of the channel was that it was going to be like an explosion of his brain and his interests. So it was never just going to be, because a lot of car content by this point was like supercars or classic cars. It was all quite, do you know what I mean? The channel was quite specific to a genre, and that really, you know, in terms of embracing this, being different, being eccentric, exploring all the sides of you, you know, the channel was always going to be really varied and have lots of different content on it. But equally, that came with a risk that, you know, it was then going to be quite difficult to get your head around, do you know what I mean? Because then people, you know, 1 minute they'd be watching a car launch, and the next minute they'd be watching, you know, a car being dug out of a barn, or, you know, that kind of thing. So I came up with the idea to sort of to playlist it, because on YouTube you could playlist, lots of channels do it. But you can obviously you organise your content by playlists depending on what they are. So I came up with playlist names for the content to structure it. So we had like Car Caves, Barn Finds, you know, Idle Chat, which was an interview series. We had launches, and I feel like there was other stuff as well. Well, bike content came along. The idea being, and we announced, you know, what the playlists were. And the idea being, so that it was weird and it would change all the time, but equally at the same time, people understood how that fitted into, oh, this is a car key video, or this is a barn find video, that kind of thing. So I just, you know, it's one of those things that, you know, I'm really, really, really proud of everything I did there. And I think, you know, obviously we're not together anymore, and that, you know, it's been really difficult. And, you know, there's no two ways about it. We do have differing views about the role I played with that channel and what I did. But I'm really proud of what I did there, you know, and obviously it's massively successful now, and obviously YouTube algorithms kick in, that kind of thing. And it's really big now. But, you know, that channel wouldn't exist if it wasn't for me, and it wouldn't anywhere near be as successful as it is now. I mean, my sister still runs the business, the channel day to day. You know, the office that I found, you know, the office I set up, literally built the furniture that's in it. You know, I mean, the merch shop, which you obviously came on board. I mean, for anyone listening, Fran is very much a jack of many trades, many skillful trades. But that would have been not long after that. So, because you'd have been on board for the rebrand when we rebranded.
Yes.
And at that point, we also started the merch, didn't we?
That's right. Yeah.
We started looking at the merch, and I loved that. I mean, coming up with those, the puns and the play on the names that I did with people on social, and which I just don't know to this day whether people always thought they were interacting with my ex. I don't know, because they weren't. A lot of people spent a lot of time, even on his own email. I mean, the amount of people I used to email, probably cut this bit out, but the amount of people that used to think they would always because people always wanted access to him.
Yeah.
And I would just reply to so many emails, or to get through to anybody, I would have to pretend to be him. So, which used to really irritate me, because I think a lot of people knew, not fans, but a lot of people in the industry knew that I was really heavily involved, and they knew what I was really doing and how I was managing things.
Well, I think it was very much perceived. You were very much a husband-wife team. It was very much.
Well, I hope so. I think definitely in the industry it was, or I thought it was. But even so, if I would ever reach out to them as me, I would rarely get a response. I would still have to. I would have to email from his email as him.
Yeah.
And then they would respond.
I imagine it's a very male industry.
Well, and I think it is very male, and I think they also wanted access to him, because I think even though it was a husband and wife team, I don't know if people, and maybe it is a male thing, really recognised that. I think they probably still thought he was doing a lot more than he was doing. Do you know what I mean? Because they maybe just thought that I was like a PA, I don't know, but in the background, rather than the person that was really driving things forward and pushing things forward.
Yeah.
They maybe thought I was more of a PA type role, so therefore
they wanted to talk to
so they wanted to talk to the horse's mouth, or what they thought. Little did they know that I actually pretty much was the horse's mouth, Yeah, so that was a tricky one, really.
So tell us about, we've got a very successful, booming business now. And then tell us, how much do you want to tell us between then and now? Because obviously a lot has now changed in your life.
Yeah, God, a lot has now changed. And to be honest, that channel and running that was pretty much the straw that broke the camel's back, probably, with the marriage. I think working that closely together.
And again, I think a lot of couples can relate to this. Couples who've worked together, it does put a huge strain on the relationship.
It did, and particularly we were in lockdown.
And then, I was going to say, you've got the pandemic, you're starting a new business as well.
Yeah. And I think equally, it's a weird dynamic in the sense that one of you is the face of something, but the other person is then sort of really running things, and I was obviously running it as a business.
Well, don't they say behind every successful man there's an even more successful woman?
Oh, an amazing woman, yeah. So I think it was just, it was tricky for lots of reasons that I won't go into, and it just became apparent that things really weren't going to work for us, and the reason I brought my sister on board was to sort of try as a last-ditch attempt to kind of put a bit of space between us, so that I could maybe try and step back a little bit. And she could run it more day to day with him, which she did, and she does. But it still kind of wasn't really enough, really, and things kind of obviously came to a bit of a head. Yeah, and then...
And what about sort of the timing of that? I'm sure everyone will be interested to know the timing of where you are now. Where are we? We are in...
So this is March 2024. So that would have been... when we finally, we'd kind of come to the decision that we were separating, but we physically separated in September, early September 2022, right. About 18 months ago now.
Okay. So that was a huge change.
And I left. Didn't really want to, but left working for the business. It just became untenable. And then very much had to try and figure out what I was going to do. Obviously, he'd now got this career and business that I'd facilitated, and don't get me wrong, very good at what he does. But I was left thinking, right, I'm now going to be a single mum. What am I going to do? I basically took a job that I shouldn't have taken, a sort of creative studio in Manchester for 6 months. which was not a good idea because it was sort of a long commute. I had to go up there 2 or 3 days a week.
But can we just to pause that there? So we've got a woman who has not worked in a formal job for how many years?
Oh God, 4 years at this point. I'd been running a business. I'd been running my own business.
Yeah, but I guess you had the huge success of the YouTube behind you to demonstrate.
Yeah, creatively.
I just think, though, for you to walk straight into another role says something about you, right? In terms of your skills and how you were able to present for them to want to hire you, right? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people who are listening to this who have had children and are contemplating going back into the workplace, and it's daunting, right? It's hard.
Yeah, and I would love that to be the case. But I actually applied for a lot of jobs prior to that. I applied for a lot of jobs, even as the marriage was coming to an end. I was applying for jobs, knowing that I was going to be a single mum, and I did not get a look in. And I said this on the voice audio when I launched this one. I just wasn't even getting a look in because I guess I've described my career always being a little bit fluid. You know, I'd sort of had some freelance stints. I then worked, had kids, didn't work, you know. So my CV does look, I completely take that on board, it looks a little bit odd because of decisions I've made. In actual fact, it probably doesn't look that odd because like young people, young kids, they don't stay anywhere for longer than a year now, and then they change. Yeah. So their careers are very, you know, the days
it's much more acceptable.
Yeah, the days of kind of having to stay for 3, 4, 5 years have gone. So in today's standards, my if I was young, my CV would look great, but I just wasn't getting a look in. I think probably a lot of employers couldn't get their head around my career, what it meant, where I then was. So that was basically the only job interview I got. So I felt very much like, you know, I was a single mum, I'd got to get a job, you know. So I just basically took the job and ended up having to commute to Manchester 2 or 3 days a week, which was just hardcore, you know, and just sort of, you know, the kids and I would moved house, we'd moved out, and I was then commuting to Manchester. And
what's the length of that commute? Because your listeners won't necessarily know where you live.
It was a 3-hour commute, and sort of leaving the kids quite early in the morning. Yeah, getting them on a school bus. Yeah, it was a lot, and it was a real lot. And after about 6 months, I was not in a good place mentally at all. I really, really wasn't. I think the fallout of the sort of final marriage breakdown, the separation, the kids, setting up a new house, starting a new job that was so far away. Yeah, it was not a good time. So I didn't stay there after the 6 months. I ended up having to leave and just take some time out because I was not in a good place at all, really.
Right.
Which then...
Well, you went and did something, didn't you?
Yeah.
That became a real catalyst.
Yeah. One thing I did do, which I put on my audio for this one's work, was... as I'd already sort of mentioned, you know, sort of looking after myself physically was always something that was really important to me. And I was acutely aware I hadn't done so well. Hadn't been looking after myself. So I did book myself onto a sort of body camp, fitness camp thing, just because I thought, well, look, there's a lot that's out of control in my life right now. But one thing I can control is sort of me and my physical presence and what I look like, that kind of thing. So it was one of those sort of things of control what you can control kind of thing. So I sort of booked onto this camp. It was on this fitness retreat in Mallorca that I came up with the idea for This Woman's Work, as I've said on the audio that's out there, probably dreadfully. But yeah, so that brings us to today.
Great, amazing. So what's next?
Oh, this is the question I always like asking people. Loads. There's so much I want to do with This Woman's Work. I think there's so much that it can do to help other women. So video, obviously, which is why I'm doing this. I know that's a big thing. It's a big thing to obviously make the brand a little bit more tractionable, a little bit more sticky. So video, I've got to start doing a lot more video, podcasts. And also I need video for social. You know, at the moment I've only got static stuff because it's audio only. So in order to really get the traction I need on social, I've got to do video. So video, I've started doing kind of slightly separate chats, one of which is, I've already done one, which is called Break Room, where I'm just sitting down, rather than chatting through someone's specific career, I just chat about what it's like as a working woman with someone, so it's a bit more relaxed, as if we're in the break room at work kind of thing.
Nice.
Done one of those, got another one of those coming up. I've got another idea, which I won't talk about right now, but that will be, I'll announce that soon. So just loads of ideas, merch. What I need to do, I've got some really cool ideas for stuff I want to print on t-shirts and mugs, and events. You know, one of the things I did with the Late Break Show was I really, you know, I'd done events in previous roles, and I really wanted to do them with the Late Break Show, which we did, but ultimately, you know, it wasn't something really my ex ever wanted to do, so that was quite a controversial thing, I think, in lots of ways. But I do think it also really helped propel the brand to another level. You know, not that they ever made us any money, but it kind of, you know, again showed that we were different, and, you know, we were going to be trying different things, and it really kind of brought the brand to life. You know, it really gave a way for people to come and experience the brand rather than just sort of watching it on YouTube. So that's why I'd love to do. I've got some great event type stuff I'd like to do for women, and, you know, that kind of thing. Loads. There's so much I want to do that it almost just becomes quite daunting sometimes.
Amazing. So you have shared very openly with us,
which I may well cut all out.
I hope not, because I think it's really important that people can see the journey that you've been on. And personally, I find it very inspiring, and I'm sure lots of other people will as well. So, and, you know, I see a woman who has, you know, you're an incredibly determined woman, and you're very committed to what you do. And I think you can see that from a very young age as well, right? You know, you kind of, you know, you're faced with adversity and you're looking at it and you're like, right, okay, how do I make the best out of this situation? You identified as a young woman, well, I don't want to end up like that, right?
Yeah.
What do I need to do that's different? So now here you are in your mid-40s. If you were to give that younger Michelle some advice, what would that be?
Gosh, what would I give? I ask this question to women all the time. What advice would I give my younger self? I think it would probably be the advice I hear more than anything else from other women doing this. And that is, and I think I'd referenced it a couple of times, unless I cut the previous bits out, to listen to my gut. Listen to my gut, listen to my intuition, because I think I've always had it. And I think, as I've described in that early years, you know, making sort of slightly, probably quite risque career decisions to leave something, take a punt on something else. I think I've done those. But I think there's been a lot of times that I haven't listened to my gut, like really quite poignant times I haven't listened to it, and I should have done. And I think because I think I am maybe slightly intuitive, and then when I don't listen to my gut, my intuition doesn't let me forget that I've not listened to my gut, and it sort of sits in me. It's weird to describe, but it's only really in this journey I've done the last couple of years, and likewise with this woman's work, that I've realised that I think I have always had quite a strong inner voice. I have always had quite a strong intuition. And then when I've ignored it, it's sort of just sat in me like a kind of, you're just not doing the right thing. You're not doing the thing you're meant to be doing. And even though I've made the best of it, and I've kind of, like you said, I've been determined to kind of be happy and try the best of it, it's just still sat in me that you're just not doing the thing you should be doing. So that's definitely the advice I would have. And that's a tricky thing, because in some respects, you know, everything has brought me to where I am today. So you kind of, it's tricky, isn't it, going, well, you know, if I did different things, I wouldn't be where I am now.
Yeah.
Or would I have been here earlier? I think that's the thing you don't know. But I think what I do know is, obviously, I wouldn't change where I am now, in the sense, obviously, I've got my kids, that kind of stuff. But equally, I can't also deny, if I'm true to myself, that I know I have ignored my gut for quite big things.
So that brings me on to the next question, then, which would be, what do you think your older self would advise you today?
I don't ask that question of people. You can't throw a curveball in. What would my older self...
I want you to imagine you're sitting there. Give me an age when you're older.
Like 70?
So you're 70, okay.
What would my older self say to me now?
Picture you're 70. Where are you?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. Hopefully sitting on a beach somewhere. I'd be really proud of myself. That would be amazing.
No doubt in a bikini and still rocking it.
No. Or those sort of sucking kind of skirt things. What would my older self? Good advice would they give me now? To be honest, be patient, probably. I think I almost can sort of often hear my older self, and I can hear, but again, it's that inner voice still. It's, wanting, like I want this one's work to already be bigger than it is, so that it can do more. Obviously, I need it to earn money for me and the kids, that kind of thing. So it's sort of patience is not something I'm naturally very good at. So I think it's just being patient and things like, trust the process, trust the fact that things will happen at the right time, that kind of stuff.
Nice.
That's my inner voice, and it says it all the time. It doesn't mean I listen to it, 'cause it's like, no, I want it now, kind of thing. So,
great.
Maybe.
Trust. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
And then finally, do you have a mantra that you like to live by and something you would like to share with your listeners?
So this is always my final question, isn't it? Yes, the mantra that I would like to throw out there into the world, or the advice, the life advice, is, it is maybe going to be a little bit controversial, is to take responsibility for your own life. And it's something that I've experienced myself, and sometimes I've been on the receiving end of people not doing it a lot. And it's one of the things I really devoutly raise my children with is it's your life, it's your responsibility. Don't make out that you're some passenger in your life. It is your life, these are your choices, these are your consequences. You have to own them, you have to live with them. So absolutely own your life, own and take responsibility for it. And I think as a slight tangent to that, there's a lot in the media at the moment for good reason about people and various sort of, I guess, personality disorders, which is the wrong word for it, but sort of personality traits that people have and how it can, how it impacts them. And I see it a lot on social media, particularly with something like ADHD. There's a lot discussed in that respect. But for me, and I think having been on the receiving end of that, I think it is absolutely vital that dialogue goes on and that awareness keeps, is out there for people that have some kind of personality disorder or some kind of condition like that. It's really important that that's a strong dialogue. For me, the thing that's missing with that dialogue is the impact a lot of those personality disorders have on other people and have on the people around them. And I think that's really quite important. I think, something like narcissism is discussed a lot, and you very much get that from the person
on the receiving
end of it. And I totally get that. But something like ADHD, I think, it's very much spoken about from the first person's point of view, not the people that are around it. It's not someone's fault that they suffer from a condition like that. Like we all know, it's either genetic or it's a trauma response. It's a way that you've learned to cope with something probably as a child. So it's not that person's fault, but it is their responsibility to manage it and to manage its impact on the people around them. And I think, if you have someone that is quite clearly communicating with you in a loving and supporting way about how your behaviour is affecting them hurtfully, and yet you just consistently choose to do nothing about that. That is a choice. You can wash it away however you want, but what you're doing and what you're saying to the people around you is that you're always choosing you. You're choosing you, and you are more important than those other people. And it's just that sort of that little thing that's just constantly there going, no, I want to be who I want to be, and I'm more important than, and not caring enough about the impact that has on other people. So that, I think, is in the same vein of just take responsibility for your life.
Great. Well, Thank you, Michelle, for letting me be
Well,
your
thank you.
interviewer.
I want to thank you for doing it. You know, thank you so much. You're just.
I think you know, for the purpose of everyone who's listening to this, you know, I am your biggest cheerleader, and I think what you're doing is an amazing thing, and I think that you are going to benefit a lot of women with the work you're doing. So congratulations.
So, thank you very much.
If you would like to hear more about this chat, see some pics and read about how to get started in this industry and or this role, then please go to our website www.thiswomanswork.org. The link is on this podcast page and across our socials. Sincere thanks.